Welcome to the Buy Box Experts podcast. We bring to light the unique opportunities brands face in today's e-commerce world.
Hey, and welcome to the Buy Box Experts podcast. This is Eric Stopper. This episode is brought to you by Buy Box Experts. Buy Box Experts takes ambitious brands and makes them unbeatable. We've got a team of consultants. I am one of them. Come and talk to us. There are about, I was counting them up the other day. There's about 600 tools to service Amazon sellers in as of the date of this recording. A lot of them can be found in the App Store. There is no way you're using all of them. And the ones that you are using, it's hard to tell if you are actually doing it right. So come and talk to us. We'll help you understand what you need, what technology stack you need to run your business. Go to buyboxexperts.com, click on the free analysis button. We'll look at your top selling listings, give you some of our secret sauce, and then hopefully we can partner together. Today, I am very pleased to be joined by Blake Modersitzki, managing partner at Pelion Ventures. They're a venture capital firm based in Salt Lake City, Utah. I will let you look them up. They have a very cool portfolio of tech companies. Blake is a hardworking farm kid from Idaho who has been investing in early-stage tech startups since 1996. He's an economist, a finance expert, and just generally an excellent person. Blake, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So a big part of our listener base are developers and people running SaaS-based companies that service specifically Amazon. And we had a few of them that specifically requested that I bring you on the show. And then some other ones had some specific questions that they wanted me to ask a venture capital firm. So they want to get the edge, right? There's all these many softwares. There's a lot of people in the ecosystem. There's a lot of competition. And so I've boiled it down to two questions for you, which is where I want to start. So number one, you are a tech investing expert. I feel like out of all the people, you have this crystal ball, or at least this crystal ball process where you're able to see, what really is disruptive and what's going to be great. So if you were consulting one of these firms, one of these Amazon selling tool firms, and you wanted to help them introduce or develop a disruptive technology, what are some of the first steps that you would encourage them to take?
Yeah, great question. So I'd probably ask them to look at a couple of different things. The first one is, how big is the market opportunity? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of wonderful businesses out there that play in a, $50, $100, $200 million market size. And people can build a great business and lifestyle. From a venture capitalist standpoint, we look at what companies, is it $1 billion+ size market? So, have some of that reflection around how big of an opportunity is it. If you conclude that it's a huge opportunity, then I'd say, look at yourself, your team, and say, all right, are we the guys or individuals to take this thing forward? And a lot of times the answer is yes. But oftentimes it's where do we need to add expertise? And sometimes that expertise is by finding a strong go-to-market person. Sometimes it's adding great mentors. There's a difference between my brother-in-law who's a dentist versus a CEO that's been very successful, that is spending a lot of time mentoring entrepreneurs that are building big businesses. All things are not created equal. And then the last thing I would encourage you to think about and ask the question is, how disruptive is this technology? So many times we see something that's disruptive, and is it a vitamin or is it a painkiller? Vitamins are optional. It's disruptive, but not a lot of people want them. A painkiller, that's a must-have when you break your arm or something like that. So if you ask the disruption question, and you can answer it that way, then you start to line up and you move forward.
So you're speaking my language here. A lot of the people that come to me, they first of all, they want free consulting in perpetuity, which we're not offering. But they want to know, like, how, I've got this new product, and how do I become the best seller on Amazon? And you actually put it really well in another podcast that you were on. It might have been a forum that you were speaking at, but You said, have you really built a better mousetrap, or have you just painted the mousetrap a different color?
Yep.
Tell the listeners a little bit about that, about how you view this concept of real disruptive innovation, and how do we get there?
I use one of our portfolio companies as an example. So we're investors in this company called Cloudflare. And when we first invested into Cloudflare, they were living and playing in a world around cloud computing. This is a decade ago, and cloud computing was new. But the problems that existed, so when you think about a firewall, so firewalls have been around. Check Point invented, they were one of the early pioneers in firewalls. But when you took it to the next level, to the cloud, all of a sudden the existing technology didn't work anymore. It was a complete re-architect by a lot of the security vendors. Cloudflare started immediately providing a firewall in the cloud. Roll forward to today, that company provides a lot of different services, but it was building upon this concept and idea that, oh, by the way, got disrupted, in this case, by a new computing environment. Sometimes it gets disrupted by complete innovation. We're investors in this company called Riverbed. All Riverbed did was speed up data. I remember the first presentation, the CEO said to me, "We make data move faster than the speed of light." Now, yeah, exactly. That was my reaction. I was like, wait, that's like, not a physicist, but that's impossible. But when he explained the innovation associated with it, and you understood, moving data across the internet is not a new thing, but the way they had innovated and basically tricked the internet, they could move data, multiple times faster. That's disruption.
Tricking the internet. That almost seems far-fetched, right? If I was sitting in that executive meeting, I would really want to see what it actually looks like. And I think this is a question. If I were wanting to raise venture capital funding, I would want to make sure that I had this presentation really dialed in. How did they justify that to you? How did they quantify the speed of light in their tool? How did they present this to you to get you convinced?
Well, first of all, you have to start with understanding. So when the internet was created back in the DARPANET era, when there were 3 universities, University of Utah was one of them. The way the internet worked was you sent data across from point A to point B. Once the data arrived at point B would then send back to point A what they call ACKs, or acknowledgement, saying, I received the information, send the next batch of information. Sure. So it was this start-stop mentality. Well, back then, because packets got dropped so frequently, that's the way it had to work, because the internet was not as stable as it is today. It was flaky. Well, in today's world, the internet's super stable. So what Riverbed was the name of the company. What they did is they sent data from point A to point B. They just kept sending it. And then at point B, the acknowledgments, before they received the data, they started sending to point A acknowledgments, meaning you're telling point A, I got the information before it shows up. Now all of a sudden, point A does not stop and wait for the acknowledgments. It just keeps sending data because they're receiving the acknowledgments back here. So you go from send, receive, send to receive, to send, because on the other side of the freeway is all of the acknowledgments coming back. So now all of a sudden, you don't have this stop-start mentality. You have this continuous stream. So when you think about it that way, they invented something pretty novel and unique, because they bet on the stableness of the infrastructure. They were able to say, you know what, the internet's not dropping packets like it did in the beginning. Let's go ahead and tell it so it just keeps sending information. Oh, by the way, they would do all of this reconciling on the other side. And if by chance something did drop, well, they could reconcile that.
Yeah, they put contingencies in place to deal with any problems that it ran into.
Right. So when the CEO explained that to us, we're like, okay, I now get your example of tricking the internet and faster than the speed of light. Oh, by the way, 2 of them were statements which, oh, by the way, not true, but they were statements to prove the point that what they had invented was super disruptive on point A and point B.
So they built in the pitch to you guys. It was almost like marketing statements that really drove the point home. Then.
Yeah, because they could use examples that we're like, hey, wait a minute, how does that work? And then it fostered this really interesting conversation. Like, I totally got why they used that as an example when they explained the way their product worked. And by the way, they weren't trying to deceive or trick me. They were using it as a kind of an impact statement.
Sure. Because
it was so core to their core fundamentals. That, but by the way, this is a widely accepted practice today. We funded this company, 15 years ago.
And now it's standard.
Yeah. So what they do today is built it's built into everything that exists. If you're moving data, they use Riverbed's architecture.
So I take two main insights out of that, right? Like, number one is they had built something really great. And obviously, like, the internet's massive. I'm curious to understand some of the finer details of what exactly they were targeting, but let's just assume, right, it was a big opportunity. You guys invested in them. The other thing that I take from that is how they sold it to you. I think a lot of these companies that build a really great tool fail at coming up with really great stories or analogies to, I don't know if it's convince or almost entice the funding that they're trying to get on that end. So is there a way to nail that? Is there a way to figure out how to talk about the product that you have come out with in order to get people to get it? Is there a framework that you apply?
We actually, it's a great question. So, we have people on our team that are, they're extraordinarily technical and bit heads. And with that, they can go into the weeds pretty deeply with the tech conversation. And then there's the question, and I usually try to frame it this way. Explain to me so that I can go home tonight and explain to at the time, now they're grown adults, my junior high and teenage children, who, by the way, are all tech savvy, but what they do. For example, we have this company called Fusion.io. It's a solid state storage company.
Right.
And what was interesting is my kids would say, well, Dad, I don't even know what they do. And I would say to them, all right, all the photos that you have, in Apple or Facebook, all of the information that you're storing in social media, that sits on a Fusion.io storage software box, because they got the concept around, okay, now I get it. I'm storing it. At the time when we invested in this company, right, Facebook was all the rage. Everything that I put on Facebook is stored in this, or all of my music for Apple, for my iTunes account is stored someplace. That's what Fusion.io did. Then they could make that connection between me as a user, the benefit that I get. Oh, by the way, the customer would have been Apple. So I make sure that I can explain to my kids, and that's, less is always more. If you can't explain to us on the back of your business card what your company does, go back and rethink what the company's value proposition is.
Is it possible to get too simple with that, right? Like, the way that I would describe some people's business to my 3-year-old is much different than I would describe it to a teenager, right? And so does that factor into the way that somebody describes their business being too simple and kind of speaking more generally? Or would you still encourage to say, like, yeah, like try to nail it in one sentence or even a fragment of a sentence?
Well, I'll come back to our earlier conversation with Riverbed. I mean, the simple comment of we move data faster than the speed of light,
right?
Period. I'm like, whoa, that's impossible. Then the next conversation is this much deeper conversation. But that one statement, that really got our attention, because we're like, that's a really bold statement. We were kind of prepared to go, yeah, we're going to pour water all over this thing, and end up walking away, giving them a term sheet literally the next day.
Oh man. So they nailed it with that. I think one of the specific questions that our software listeners were asking about is how to market their product, right, to anybody, whether that's a VC firm or to the market that they're trying to target. And so that's one very, very excellent insight. Just saying, look, break it down, make it simple and make it powerful, right? And make sure that a teenager or even someone younger could explain it. But are there any other secret sauces that you would encourage people building these SaaS tools to use in order to get higher adoption rates for their products?
Yeah, maybe if you can draw some conclusion, success begets success. And so, when you think about, okay, so I have this software tool, what are there like examples that I can look at and try to mirror? So I'll give you one example. We're investors in this little company here in Utah called Neighbor.
I know the founders. Yeah, they're great guys.
Yeah. When they came in and presented to us, it was, we're Airbnb for self-storage. Well, I know Airbnb.
Mm-hmm.
I know self-storage. Super interesting. They found that interesting place between using technology versus, what self-storage is all about. Everybody knew Airbnb. The business model that's associated with that. So as these entrepreneurs that are building these tools, are the tools such where you can look at a success of something else? I had one partner that used to tell me, in the NBA, one year Michael Jordan got the league MVP. So everybody goes out and tries to draft the next Michael Jordan to join their team. Well, the next year, the MVP was Steve Nash.
Mm-hmm.
Two very different people. Right. One played point guard. One was just an unbelievable, could have played any position on the court. So it wasn't necessarily that, you want to look just like Michael Jordan. Be who you are, but be really successful. But you learned a lot from the success that somebody else had. So I guess that would be some of the advice that I would try to give these young entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and I mean, even like the branding behind each of these players too. Like the thing that comes to mind for like Kobe Bryant, right? It recently passed away. The Mamba, right? Like he was able to draw an analogy, a metaphor that very quickly put a certain perception in people's minds. And it sounds like at least the use of analogies, right, is going to help these people tremendously, even if it's just a business model. You're saying we're the blank of blank, like for like, right? Being able to make those comparisons. Has there been a company that, and I didn't prepare you for this question, but has there been a company that didn't have that in any way, shape, or form, and you still invested in them because you understood the business model thoroughly? They didn't have that nice marketing secret sauce?
I think the short answer there is no. And why I tell you that is, part of this world is the story. What is the story behind it? And sometimes those stories are hard and difficult, and the journey to get there is fraught with near bankruptcy, all sorts of stuff. Embrace that story and tell it, because that helps to frame what it is. When an entrepreneur, when we can't get our heads wrapped around a story, just because oftentimes when you don't have a story, what comes across is you're trying to boil the ocean. And what I mean by that is if the opportunity is so massive that you're boiling the ocean.
I
I'll
see.
give you one great example.
Too big of a bite.
Yeah. A company here in Utah, Weave, fantastic company. And when Brandon Rodman, the founder, came in, what he talked about is the solution they were providing to the dental industry. Now, his bigger vision was a much bigger opportunity at hand, meaning, he talked about the vision. But I love the fact that when Brandon talked about this company, he talked about the success in building his first beachhead.
Sure.
And there was a story associated with it. So that's what I mean by storytelling.
Right. And you talk about the one in a row concept, right? Not doing too many things half-heartedly, just doing one really awesome thing, tabling all the rest of the stuff, and really just nailing the first vertical. You have been doing this since 1996, right? at what point did you really start focusing on this one in a row concept? Was there a specific business that you invested in and you're like, no, scrap all this other stuff, just focus on building this huge satellite or something?
Yeah. It was something that I learned very early in my career. I had the good fortune of working for Eric Schmidt prior to him going to Google. He was our CEO at Novell. A gentleman by the name of Carl Ledbetter, who had been with Eric as an executive for a long time. I interacted with some of the very best VCs early in my career, some of the real icons in this industry. And that was one of the real takeaways early in my career is just do one thing and do it really well and then move on. And so that was kind of where all of that fostered. So it came at a very early part of my career, but I learned it from some wonderful mentors in my interaction early.
Eric Schmidt. Wow. I mean, I posted a video on LinkedIn this morning about the recent Super Bowl ad that Google put out. I don't know if you saw Loretta, but that ad it's about Alzheimer's, right? It's about the product that they've built around helping like your Google Home remember the things that you forget. Ignore everything that Google does with your data, but just that ad is a masterpiece in my opinion. So hats off to Eric Schmidt. I'll have to invite him on.
Yeah. He'd be a great listen.
So I kind of want to put on, I want to put on the innovator's hat for a second and just talk about and try to break down Amazon as you, somebody kind of looking on the outside in. You typically invest in SaaS companies, right? And data management companies, security and infrastructure and stuff like that. I've only seen one product company in the portfolio. There may be more, and that was Owlet. So I brought Jordan Monroe on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was great. So I want to touch on that, and then I want to jump to Amazon as kind of a bigger picture. Why Owlet, right? Like the one kind of major product company out of all of these software companies. What made the difference for them? Why did Pelion invest?
Yeah, it's a great story, and one I can share. So my business partner, Chad Packard, who's just fantastic. And I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, Chad was a judge down at BYU for the business plan competition, and Owlet was part of that.
Yep.
And they came through, and Chad, gave him a thumbs up. Chad and his wife had actually just gone through a process or an unfortunate, sad situation where they actually had a baby die of SIDS.
Right.
And if you know what the product that Owlet does, it's all about infant help, infant,
well-being.
How can parents embrace the idea of monitoring their infants? And so at that time, it was still quite raw, but Chad embraced the notion and basically became a free product manager, pro bono, with Owlet for like 5 years. He just would help those guys. He'd give them advice. He'd meet with them often. And they got ready to raise a round of financing, and Chad came to me and he said, here's what I've learned about it. And I thought, well, first of all, we know more about this company than any other company we invest into. We got 5 years of data. Second of all, what they were building, it is a products company, but when you think about, there's things called the smart home. This one is the smart nursery. So the data that they collect, what they analyze. So this software underlying solution was really interesting. And then we met the team, and of course we knew those guys. That was the story behind our investment in Owlet, and we have been, extraordinarily grateful. There's a personal aspect that we're all super enthusiastic about this company because it comes from a place where we all experienced, Chad and Anna's loss. We understand at a higher level what all of that means. And then on top of that, Owlet is just like they're doing something super disruptive. Like there's a whole social issue that's coupled with this great solution that they're building.
I had the fortune of attending those same business competitions, and I went through the same ring with them, and I was doing pregnancy. There's a long story behind that, but I definitely understand where they're coming from, and you have like these 3 criteria for investing in a business, right? It's got to be disruptive, the business has to be big enough. We're talking billions, and then third is there's a passion and coachability to the founding team, or at least the executive team that's running it. Yeah. And I think that they certainly had all 3.
Yeah.
And so it made it a good bet. And you mentioned that software underlying as well. I would say that a lot of the people that listen to this podcast who sell products that are smart home devices maybe don't realize that they have this software component, all of this data that could be an even bigger part of their business. How do I know if the data that I am collecting with my smart home device is actually useful outside of my smart home device? Is there a way to vet that out?
Yeah, the advice I would give is if you get 10 customers, people that start to validate that underlying data, there you go. Now you know that it's useful. You can't only, 3 people is not a big enough cohort. 10 people is probably just right on the smaller end of it. But once you can start to like validate that there is usability, and what the usability is, I think one of the things that like Owlet discovered was not only for the parents, but then the whole medical industry, this data becomes important, not at an individual level, but at a macro level. And then all of a sudden, the consumer products industry, look, they're always looking to sell new parents something.
Right.
But if they could take that data and build better products, diapers that don't, give a rash, or diaper, like that's super useful all the way along that supply chain. So with that data, figure out where the value gets really manifested. Because I don't think they really realized that the consumer products, maybe they did, consumer products industry would be able to take that data, not to sell you and I more stuff. Look, as a grandpa, what I'm going to tell you is I'll buy anything that does not cause my little grandson's problems. So there you go. That's who I am. But if you can build me better products, I'm super grateful.
Yeah, I think, and you can definitely hear, because all of their competition videos were recorded, right? And they're on YouTube, and you can go see them. The tone and the things that they talk about become very different. It evolves as they learn more and more. And I think probably by pitch number 3, they figured it out. They really understood, wow, there is a data opportunity here, but they had no clue how to leverage it, which, I mean, Pelion, I'm sure you guys were able to help with that.
Well, that was part of why they wanted us to be an investor. Is Chad had been working with them so much around the value of this data to make our lives better, that they're like, yeah, wow, can you guys be an investor? So I mean, it was a nice sort of, we wanted to be there and they wanted us, and it was a good partnership.
So let's hit this last point. Amazon is huge. Right. We all are aware of how massive Amazon is. By the way, are you an Amazon Prime member?
I am. Absolutely.
Right on. Yeah, there's 150 million Prime users as of the recording of this podcast, and there's 370 million people in the United States, and I would say almost every single one of them probably uses one of the 150 million Prime accounts, right? So it's just a massive opportunity. So Amazon struggled for a long time, right? They were in lawsuits. They targeted books first and then jewelry. And then they launched AWS, right? This cloud, they introduced this concept of primitives for developers, where a developer could take like transactional software and checkouts and, the ability to move around video on a Python app and all this different stuff. And they made it so that you could plug and play, right? All these developers then swooped in and they started building all this amazing stuff with AWS. So you guys this is your space, right? This is your baby. You guys know big data, storage, infrastructure. So if you were to find a blind spot in Amazon's ecosystem of product offerings and the way that they do this computing, where would you look right? What kind of questions would you ask the system? What kind of queries would you run? Like where would you kind of play around in the weeds in order to build a really great Amazon product?
Yeah. First of all, Amazon is a fabulous company, and I'm old enough to remember when Amazon was a bookseller.
Mm-hmm.
And we all are like, well, Barnes and Noble is done, and then you roll forward today, and look, the Amazon, Jeff Bezos, the whole crew over there, unbelievable. They are the epitome of innovators. Today it's interesting. I'm sure for you view Amazon as what it is today. I was having this conversation with my kids. They don't remember Amazon as a bookseller. I mean, that's just not, what. And so as I think about that, oftentimes with these really big companies, and, I've used a couple examples around Cloudflare and Riverbed and Weave and what have you, is these big companies oftentimes move slower. They've architected something where the introduction of machine learning, artificial intelligence. Oh, by the way, did you know that when artificial intelligence gets released into a network, which is wonderful and great, it also breaks a lot of things around security and optimization. And so with that comes an opportunity, because the existing platforms have to kind of re-architect. They have to continue to innovate. But as a new seller or as a new entrance into that, can you solve this problem? We had this company called Elastica. They provided artificial intelligence cybersecurity. There you go. Cybersecurity, everybody does. Artificial intelligence, everybody does. You put them together, opportunity present itself. They built this really interesting solution. So within the Amazon architecture, there's lots of things that new software coming in, new protocols coming in. You can build really interesting products on top of the Amazon platform.
Yeah, and I think we've found that in a lot of the partners that we work with, right? Like Ecom Engine, they're a partner with Amazon, and they create all these really cool tools, and they're coming out with some new here in the next couple of days. There's this concept, and I'm struggling to remember the actual name of it, but it comes from this Roman architectural idea that if you add a fourth or third supporting column to the foundation of one of their buildings, that it actually makes it so that the building is more likely to topple over. You've added this additional support structure, and it's redundant. It's too much. And so it almost sounds like Amazon is constantly trying to improve their processes, bringing AI into the mix, and they're adding these additional support columns, which makes it so that the opportunity for the softwares and tools that are internal to Amazon, that they could fail very frequently. So it sounds like that's kind of the idea, is if Amazon launches something new, that's a supporting column, and you should be aware of everything that specific tool impacts. Is that kind of what I'm gathering? And then you build products around that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing about big companies like Amazon is they are big companies. And with that comes a lot of benefit, but 20 people, super nimble, continue to innovate, architect. They don't have the overhead of and pressure of being a public company.
Sure.
You can make mistakes along that journey. You can test, you can re-architect. And so with that, you become a lot more nimble in that process as you're leveraging the infrastructure of like an Amazon or anything else for that matter. There's Amazon and Microsoft and Google, IBM. There's these great big companies, but they're so large that you as a young entrepreneur, you should be able to be a lot more nimble, and you can build, innovate. Look, every 18 months, things are obsolete in the tech world.
6 months.
Yeah, 6 months. There you go.
So there are a lot of folks that I'm sure would love to get in touch with you. And I understand that about 1,000 businesses come to Pelion each year. You look at maybe 30% of them really closely. You have a pretty sophisticated vetting system. And then out of those, you maybe do 3 to 5 investments a year, right? Very selective. For the people who could potentially be your clients, how do I send them to you? Where do they go? And then how do they get to be a part of that 30%?
Yeah. So this is where I think networking comes into play, and I do it somewhat on purpose, and that is either through LinkedIn, alumni systems, friends, family. You know somebody who knows me or somebody at our organization. Leverage that to get a warm introduction, because a warm introduction, just like anything else, if you're in sales, a cold call results in a certain percentage of closure. A warm introduction results in a much higher.
Right.
So look at your network as a entrepreneur. Figure out how you know somebody at Pelion. Now, that does not eliminate the fact that you can ping me on LinkedIn. My email is blake@pelionvp.com. You can always shoot something in there. But, because we have so much coming in, find a way to get introduced into our process by somebody who will move you to the top of the list. So that's the way, because I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be scrappy. You have to be innovative. To me, that's kind of one of the innovative ways is, how are you connected to me? It's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Right.
There you go. What is your degree of connection to me?
So that's
I'm Kevin Bacon, by the way. Let me just be clear. Yeah. Not that cool.
If you want to get in contact with Blake, the Kevin Bacon principle absolutely applies. But go and reach out to him. Go and check out their portfolio companies on PelionVP.com. Blake, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to the Buy Box Experts podcast. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web, and we'll see you next time.